You're listening to Big World Network.
Skyfire, Episode 9, written and read by Arthur W. Johnson. The Indoloch was the only pub in Athlone boasting of a means for a passerby to know who was drinking there without having to enter. Every regular had their own personal mug. A mug missing from the cubbyhole cabinet making up the front window frame meant the owner was at the bar. The thatched roof overhung the door and window by a couple of feet, further diminishing the daylight inside. That didn't matter since night had fallen. The inside had originally been white stucco above dark wood paneling, but the white had yellowed from years of tobacco smoke. "Would that be old Sean Clancy I'm standing behind then?" "Aye, and that sounds like the good father asking, 'May I treat you to a pint then, father?'" "I'd be hurt if you didn't." Father O'Connor and Fahey went to the front window and took down their mugs. As the priest handed his mug over to Mike to be filled, he said to Sean, "I must have word with you about your grandson Robin." "That young scamp, what's he done now, father?" "He's becoming a hellion, you know." "That I've noticed. Since his father died last year, I've not had enough time to spend with him and keep him away from that lad Will Brandon." "There lies your trouble, all right. I wasn't sure you knew. Can't you tell him to stay clear of the lad?" "I have, but the more he's around him, the more disobedient he becomes. I haven't the youth in me to chase him down, father." "I can see what you mean, and it doesn't help that Will and his mother get an allowance from Lord Mayfair. It makes him think he's a cut above the rest of us." "Aye, now there's another problem. Mayfair's true heir thinks the same thing, and it worries me what will happen when he inherits Mayfield Manor." Fahey'd been standing by without a word, but he could keep quiet no longer. "That pile of rubble should be torn down brick by brick." He slammed his mug down on the bar, sloshing ale over the rim. "I've held my peace for a number of years now, since Seamus Warren, in fact. But it still angers me that he got half my property before I could sign it over to the lad." A law had been passed allowing a man to till twice his allotment of land, provided half of it was in his son's name. Fahey had not gotten the extra allotment transferred to Seamus fast enough after his birth, and had lost it. The door burst open just then, and young Mayfair entered as if he owned the pub and the whole town, which, in a manner of speaking, he did. He was a tall, handsome young man with flowing blonde hair and the beginnings of a goatee and mustaches. Unfortunately, his appearance was ruined by the sneer he wore and the haughty attitude he presented. "Innkeeper, I'll have a pint of your best," he bellowed to make sure his presence was known. "Did you bring your mug?" Mike asked sarcastically. "Now do I look like the sort who would carry a mug about with me?" Mayfair asked with equal sarcasm. "Nay, your lordship," Mike said in the same tone, "but my regulars each have their own, and I have no spares." "Right. Well, then I'll have this one," he said, snatching Father O'Connor's as he was putting it to his lips. The contents splashed into the priest's face and down his front. He forgot himself for a moment and aimed a fist at Mayfair's nose, but Fahey stopped him mid-strike. Young Mayfair swung back to face the priest squarely. His dead brown eyes and the vivid blue of the priest locked in mortal combat as tension in the pub mounted. A brawl in the pub was not unusual, but for a lord or a priest to be involved was unheard of. Those near at hand could taste the electricity as the two stared at each other with loathing. Mayfair broke the silence with a barely audible whisper. "I'll remember that." He slammed Father O'Connor's mug down on the bar, sloshing more of the frothy brew onto the priest. Fahey steadied Father O'Connor as the young man wisely stomped out of the pub. Seamus came up to his mother as she worked in her flower garden along the sunny front side of the cottage beneath the overhanging thatch. "Aren't they lovely when they first bloom?" Lorna delicately moved the blossoms aside to reach a single weed. She was due to have the baby soon. This would be her third. Seamus had heard the stories about how the first one, an older brother who had been stillborn, it had taken his parents a long time to get up the courage to try again. Seamus was the fruit of that attempt, and he was very glad that they tried. He loved life and his parents immensely. They told him that his birth had been a very difficult one, and he hadn't seemed to want to come into the world. As a matter of fact, they said he had been breech, whatever that was. They said something about his refusing to come out and trying to crawl back in. He didn't know how that could be, considering how much he loved being alive. Seamus stood beside his mother in the warm spring sunshine that made her hair shine almost like the Virgin Mary's halo painted on the wall in the church. She was so beautiful when she worked the terrace. He hadn't the heart to tell her that Fahey would be in from the field soon for his lunch. She loved her garden so much that it seemed a sin to take her away from it to face the heat of the hearth. The colors of the flowers were as varied as he'd seen in town. His favorites were the pale blue pansies. He couldn't decide whether it was the muted color or the comical expressions they wore that he liked best. He smiled at the back of his mother's head as she reached toward them. She gave a sharp yelp. Seamus didn't know what to think. He stepped to the side and watched her round face. Her pointed chin quivered for a moment, then stopped. Her usually red lips were pale and drawn tight. Her eyes widened and then narrowed and then widened again. "Seamus," she whispered, almost like it hurt to speak. "Go and tell your father to come." As he started to turn, she grabbed his hand. She looked at him with glazed eyes. "Then go and get Maggie as quickly as you can." But she held on to his hand. He felt strange as she stared at him before she finally said, "I love you, lad." She released his hand and he raced as fast as he could toward the fields. He met Fahey as he was coming in and told him what had happened. "Go then and get the midwife, lad, and be quick," Fahey said as he set off at a dead run for the cottage. As Seamus ran toward the town and the midwife's cottage, he marveled at how fast his father could move. The thought that he would soon have a brother to play with put wings on his feet, and he was at Maggie's door before he knew it. He rapped sharply on the arched door and waited, prancing from foot to foot, but it did not open. He hammered with the sight of his fist, and still no one came. Realizing that the midwife must be out, he vaulted the low wall into the neighbor's yard and knocked on her door. It opened quickly, and Mrs. McDowell asked, "What is this commotion?" Seamus puffed breathlessly. "Maggie Thatcher, where is she?" "Gone off to visit her sister, lad. It's but a few miles along the road to Ballinasloe," she said, pointing in the opposite direction from the O'Flaherty farm. Seamus was sure that Mrs. McDowell would forgive him for being brief, but everyone knew that fetching the midwife was a time of urgent need. He ran so hard that his chest tightened and he could hear his heart beating in his ears. He thought he would collapse by the time he reached the sister's cottage. It was indeed a few miles out of town. Quite a few, he thought. Maggie and her sister both came to the door. "Come," he panted. "Quick, please." "You poor lad," the sister cooed. "That's a long way to run." He nodded his head, unable to speak for lack of air. He wheezed and coughed, and the overhanging thatch work began to spin above him before it all went black. He felt himself swimming, reaching for the surface, wet. His eyes fluttered open. He discovered Maggie's sister bending over him, wiping his face with a damp cloth. "There you are, then," she quipped as a smile broke across her face. "I thought you'd gone on to join the Saints, lad." Seamus remembered his mission and started to leap up, but she stayed him with a firm and gentle hand. "Relax now. Maggie's gone off to help. You need not run any more today." She dipped the rag into the pail of water beside the bed. "You're a brave young lad to run so far." Seamus felt proud as he looked around the low room at the things collected over a lifetime. He had never been called brave. He had never had cause for bravery before, and it was a feeling he rather enjoyed. He sat up slowly, and this time she didn't try to stop him. "I should be getting back all the same," he said. "I suppose you must," she said. "You're probably anxious to see your new brother." She smiled at him and then added, "Or sister." He hadn't thought of that possibility. For months, since his mother had explained why she was growing fatter, he had only thought in terms of a brother. "You need not run now, Seamus," she said as he raced to the gate. "She's in good hands." He waved farewell as he walked a respectful distance down the road before breaking into a trot. He couldn't help himself. This was something new to him, and he wanted to see the little creature, boy or girl, before anyone else, except, of course, his parents and Maggie Fletcher. He trotted for a while, and then walked as he caught his breath before trotting some more. While he walked, he had time to admire the green pastures of the rising and falling landscape and the way the stone walls followed the contours. He slowed to a walk again as he approached Mayfield Manor and its 3 floors of windows capped off with the white marble pediments. The high stone terrace by the front door was large enough to hold his father's cottage inside the massive stone banisters balanced on the heads of so many leaping stone lions. The white coins and the white shutters at each of the many windows set off the yellow brick. His father had taught him all those terms when they were out walking once. A young man in his teens, whom Seamus thought to be the next Mayfield, stepped through the front door and bellowed something. Seamus was too far away to hear the words, but he stopped and watched out of curiosity. Another older man ran up the side steps and nodded toward the first man. After a few words of exchange, the young man, who seemed to tower over the other because he was above him on the stairs, raised his arm and struck him with a riding crop. The second man dashed down the steps and around the corner, returning momentarily at a trot, leading a horse fitted with a saddle. The young man with blond hair descended the stairs slowly, fitting the fingers of his gloves, then mounted the horse. He leaned down and spoke a few more words to the man holding the bridle before striking him again and galloping away. Seamus could only assume that someone had taken too long to prepare the horse for the young lord's afternoon ride. He felt sorry for the groom as the man sat down on the bottom step, rubbing his shoulders where the blows had landed. The situation nagged at his mind as he continued his journey home. He kept trying to push it aside and think about the more cheerful event that was taking place at home. He felt like he had been gone from home all day, though it was probably been only a couple of hours. He expected to hear something when he got home, some cheering, a baby's cry, but not dead silence. His folks had told him that his birth had been difficult, but that it wasn't usually that way. As he approached the plank door, the midwife came out, blocking his way. "Why don't you sit here with me for a moment?" she said, pointing at the bench against the sunny wall. "But can't I see the baby first?" "Your father is in there now." She paused and patted the bench, saying softly, "Sit, lad." He bowed to her command, and she sat down beside him, putting an arm around him. "What is it then, Miss Fletcher?" he asked. "A brother or a sister?" She looked down at him, her face contorted as her eyes became like pools ready to spill over their banks. Her chin quivered as she said, "It would have been a girl." "Would have been?" Seamus repeated as he struggled to rise. She held him back and brushed her hand over his hair. She brushed a stray hank from his forehead and searched his eyes. "There's naught you can do, lad. The good Lord has taken her back to him." Seamus felt his own eyes pool, distorting his vision. "But she was only a wee small baby." "I know, lad, but heaven will choose where we may not." She brushed the same stray locks back again and gently took his chin in her hand. "He chose to take your mother too, lad." She pulled him into her ample bosom to comfort him as he realized what she was telling him. "No, she can't be." But he couldn't say the word. She tightened her embrace as they both shook with tears. He tore loose, then stood before her and yelled in anger, "But you were here. Why did you let her die?" "I didn't, lad," she explained. "It was all over before I arrived." The door opened before he could say any more. In a tearful Fahey stood in the opening, his eyes swollen and red. "Have some respect for your mother, lad," he said in little more than a whisper. "Now come and say goodbye properly." Seamus followed him on tiptoes to the bedside, as though his mother were sleeping. She looked like she was sleeping, and so did the tiny little face next to her on the pillow. This isn't right, he thought. Death is supposed to be ugly. They must just be sleeping. Then he remembered what Father O'Connor had told him, for the Celts felt that death was an inviting thing, and he thought it must be true. He leaned over and kissed his mother's lifeless cheek and started to straighten. Instead, he leaned across her and kissed the baby's forehead. He turned and silently left the room, his father's eyes following him as he went. He willed himself to remain strong for his father's sake. He went out into the fields before he let his grief take over in great heaving sobs as he sank to his knees in the very soil his father had been plowing only hours before. "She just seemed to be sleeping," he said to Father O'Connor again, "and her last words to me before I went to get Maggie were, 'I love you, lad.' As if she knew she was going to die, Father," he said as he turned square on to the priest. Could she have known? His eyes again welled up with the memory. They sat on the bench amidst the fragrance of the roses in the rectory garden. The priest laid a reassuring hand on his shoulder. It's impossible to know what another person knows. It's as I told you, lad. Death is not to be feared. It comes to each of us once in our lives. If we accept it when it takes someone we love, we won't be as frightened when it comes for us. He looked into Seamus's eyes. Why do you think a wake is such a joyful occasion, lad? We're sending the soul of the departed off to a better existence and securing an easier departure for ourselves. He missed his mother awfully, but Seamus suddenly pitied his father. The wake for Lorna had been at the cottage, for she wished to be buried among her flowers rather than the crowded church garden. The plaster walls had known no joy those 3 days, but radiated the gloom that was on Fahey's face. He had loved Lorna so deeply that he could see only his own loss and not Lorna's gain. Seamus wondered if a cloud would ever lift from the Fahey roof. It had been a month since his mother's death, and Fahey showed no sign of ever smiling again. Several of Fahey's friends from the pub had stopped by to see how he was coming about, but Seamus had sent them away rather than have them see his father sitting at the table staring at the cold hearth. What can I do about him? He asked the priest. Give him time. He'll come around soon, lad. But father, he's not eating. He's getting awfully thin. Aye, that worries me too, lad, but he'll get hungry soon, and that'll be the sign that he's finally come to terms with your mother's ghost. I'll stop and have a word with him. Thank you, father. I think that might help. Several more days passed with young Seamus working like a man in the fields. He didn't know how much longer he could do the heavy work alone, but he felt he had to keep the farm going. He walked into the cottage at the end of a grueling day of hoeing weeds to find his father sitting at the same place, but he had a chunk of cheese in his hands and a wad in his cheek. There was a pitcher of goat's milk in front of him, already half gone. He swallowed the cheese and gulped down more of the milk, and then smiled at Seamus and said, Eat, lad, we have rocks to clear from the corner of the lower field yet today. Land ho! The lookout bellowed, announcing their arrival in New York. Seamus rejoined the present and peered westward for his first look at his new home.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to Big World Network.